Everyone seems to think that being permanent or long-lasting is the only indicator of success for a job, a hobby, or a passion. And while I think that's true for relationships, you want them to be permanent, it's not necessarily true with everything else. Those of us with ADHD, we do tend to bounce around a lot. We go from one job to the next or one hobby from the next. And I just want to ask the question, what's wrong with doing something for a little while and then moving on? Why do we have to stick with things forever? Can't a phase just be a phase? Let people try things. Just because it's temporary doesn't mean you don't learn something from it. And the point of our episode today is going to be the things that you might actually learn from these temporary things and experiences. I'm Aaron.
I'm Cass.
This is Fuck the Plan, the ADHD Project podcast. So I want to start with a question, which is, why is everybody obsessed with things having to be permanent? So I understand that we want some kind of stability, and that's not a bad thing. But Cass, why do we think that it has to be everything, and we have to always be permanently doing the same job or eating the same type of deli meat for the rest of our lives?
I think there's a lot of ways that we can go with this.
Yeah.
You know, you get that, is this just a phase? As if a phase is a bad thing to go through.
No.
A phase in itself could be a giant learning period, and I very much cling to that. But I think there's a lot in the media about finding your happily ever after,
Right.
whether that's love or landing in a career, and they make it seem like that's the end of the movie.
Right.
Yay.
Yeah. And
Or
go ahead.
Oh, actually lost my train of thought there.
Perfect. Me too. But no, I think that's a good point, is that happily ever after is like what people are chasing. Well, I do think there are things that can be permanent. You know, I don't think it always necessarily has to be tangible things like a job or like even a hobby or a passion, you know, and we'll get into this, but there's plenty of things that I've done as hobbies or as real genuine passions of mine that I don't either have the time or the space or the passion or interest in doing anymore. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing.
I do think I gathered my train of thought from the last one. I also think, not to get political, but that schooling is an element as to why there's so much stress.
That's true.
Because when we're 17 years old, we're like, okay, take a loan out for hundreds of thousands of dollars to decide what you want to do with your life.
Which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but I think that mindset is like, you need to know what you're doing with your life before you're even 18.
Right.
And you get set up on this whole course that you can't really reverse from financially. And I think that puts us in the mindset already, well, this is what I've chosen. This is how it's going to be.
Yeah. And that kind of feeds into the next episode that we're going to be doing, actually. But like, you know, we do those things because we think it's right or because somebody told us that's what's best. And then we get so afraid to deviate from that because we think it's going to derail our progress. And then we end up going 5, 10, 15 years without ever actually stopping to think if this is our own original thought, you know? And we get so afraid of change, but we forget that old cliche saying, which is so true, is that change is the only constant. You know, the only thing that stays consistent is that things change. And I think you would do better to, instead of focusing your energy on stopping that from ever happening and strangling whatever joy you might have out of this unfortunate situation, why can't we learn to embrace it more and look at the bigger picture? You know, I think we tend to take this micro present view of our current situations and our lives, and we fail to see the bigger picture of how we can build towards something and how we need to have varied experiences and phases to learn. I've said this a million times. It's especially true that those of us with ADHD really can only learn shit the hard way. You know, we can read all we want, and there's a lot to be learned from that. But the lessons that stick out the most are the ones you learn from doing, you know, from getting your hands on it and actually doing things. And how could you ever possibly learn enough things by doing if you don't go out and do them?
Right. Actually, the article that I wrote for the ADHD project last month was all about that. Mm-hmm. It was all about how you need to try and go headfirst into change. Because the moment you stop and you're complacent in stagnation, what the hell's the point?
Yeah.
Like,
and you talked in that article about something that I found super valuable is, you know, not just external change, but internal change with your own perception and how you see yourself, and being willing to be flexible about yourself, not your morals, but about how you perceive yourself. You know, you can still have the same values and morals, but learn to see yourself in a different way, or see new things about yourself that you might have realized. And figuring out that you were wrong about yourself, at first it's a sting.
Oh, yeah.
But then what happens?
Then you make your peace with it and you realize that's actually kind of exciting,
Right.
that I can still surprise myself.
And you realize that now you're correct and you were wrong before.
And maybe someday I'll learn that I was incorrect again.
Who knows?
And that will be tough and I'll learn from it.
Yeah.
In what I talked about, I don't think I'm incorrect.
Right.
But like
No.
other things.
But yeah, you know, and you know, in this context, I don't mean a phase like a teenager goes through a phase, but you went through many phases of your life in discovering your own sexuality and your own gender and your own really just internal map of your brain, that you kind of went through this over and over and over again, this relearning process about yourself. And now who you are is a result of all of those layers.
Yep.
Whereas if you had just known where you are from the beginning, if that's even possible, I don't think so, then you would have missed out on a lot of that growth and a lot of those experiences and some of the things that shape the way you think and approach life.
Yeah, because you don't just get the end result.
Right.
You know, the lesson that you learn isn't just, well, now I know I'm this.
Yeah.
No, there are a lot of little things, you know, all the friends we make along the way.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
there are a lot of little things in addition to that may not be directly the end result, but that feed into a lot of other lessons you're learning.
Yes.
Like, you can copy paste a lot of these little lessons across the board, and
Right.
they can help you with a lot.
Yeah, it's things were universal and much more than we think. And we're going to get into this in a minute. That actually kind of perfectly sums up some of what I want to really get at in this episode. But to give one example, you know, as a bit of a preview, when I was in high school, I was in the marching band from 7th grade through all the way through the end of school. Excuse me. And then I came back for 2 years and I was an assistant instructor and I helped out and volunteered. Through all of that time, one of the biggest takeaways that, you know, my instructor and the guy in charge of the department was trying to impress upon us was that it's not just about the band. It's about these lessons that he's trying to teach us are universal and they apply to so many things in life. And I think that's a good microcosm of what I want to get at and drive at in this episode, is that there's so many times when we have experiences that you think, well, I'm not in the band anymore. I'm not playing music anymore. I'm not playing sports anymore. I guess that time was a waste. But was it really a waste if you learned a valuable lesson and then skills that you were able to apply to something else in your life? And that was my original sort of working title for this episode, is, you know, the skills that I've learned and how they impact me now. And I think we'll see through this that even a lot of the temporary things that we've done ultimately shape the permanent things that you do. And I don't think you can really get to that unless you try many different things.
And it's not even just temporary versus permanent. There are lessons to be learned from bad experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes more than the good experiences.
Absolutely. Those are the things you learn like in an impactful way. You know, they mean more to you sometimes.
And I think bad relationships as well.
Oh, yes.
I think the way you forgive yourself, or to begin to forgive yourself from staying in a relationship, that friendship or romantic or whatever, that was harmful to you, you know, you beat yourself up for that. You're
Right.
like, man, I was weak. But what you can do to try and turn that around is to think, but I learned what I'm not going to tolerate in the future.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I learned this. My latest ex was very upset at myself, but I learned how to plan a hell of a road trip.
Yeah.
So like,
You learn things from that, that you take with you. And like, even if it's a negative situation, there's positives that can be gained from it. And I have done so many different things in my life. I always like that meme, and I repeat it all the time as if I'm a broken record of sorts, of saying, I have failed more things than you have even tried, buddy. That's why I continue to succeed in things that I do, because I am willing to fail and look like an ass in order to learn and move myself forward. Hobbies that I've had today, before today in this, well, I don't know if I have that. I don't have these hobbies all today is what I'm getting at, but hobbies that I have had in my life up through today. I have done sports when I was younger. I have been in the band, both in a rock band that I play with and in the marching band in high school and jazz band and all those things. I have done filmmaking. I have been a cook professionally, and now I just cook for myself. I've had sales jobs, customer service jobs, retail jobs, cooking jobs, delivery jobs. I have had jobs working on cars. I have done almost everything you could think of in the way of a job, except for go to college and work in an office for the rest of my life. And I think that's cool.
You did work in an office, though.
That's true, but hopefully not for long. So, Cass, what are some of the hobbies and jobs that you've had? I know we kind of talked about a lot of the jobs in that episode, but like
in a few of them.
Yeah. Tell us about some of your interests and passions that either are still going on or maybe are no longer.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the big hobbies that I have, I still actively do.
Yeah.
Acting. I'm an avid writer and have been since I was 3 years old. But granted, I have not. I've gone through a bit of a dry spell with writing.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm done with it. That doesn't mean, well, that was a waste of time if you're not going to write anything else.
Right.
I will write something else.
Yeah.
I don't know when.
Yeah. And that writing that you did, that has helped you now write your screenplays for your plays or potentially if you're going to write movies and things like that. So you learned those skills early on. And now you're taking them into future things that could potentially be what your life's going to be about, especially with acting and things like that. So I want to go through some of the jobs and hobbies that I've had and the skills that they have taught me and like how these things apply now. So even though I may not be doing that anymore, I want people to learn or to hear what I've actually learned and taken from it and how I still use it today. And maybe if you have some examples of that, we'll go into that too.
I've got a couple.
The first one, and this is like one of my biggest things that I still do, is cooking. I've always loved to cook. And I have worked as a cook at times in my life. So there's the obvious thing that I've learned from that, which is I can cook for myself and for my family.
Damn good at it.
Thank you. I don't like to toot my own horn about it, but
I'll do it for you.
But I do make some pretty good food, I gotta say. One of the first times I hung out with my now wife, Marcy, I went over to her house and I made her eggs Benedict for dinner. And she said that if she wasn't convinced before, that was the night that convinced her.
Oh, yeah.
So cooking obviously is one great skill that I learned from working as a cook. But other things that people who, unless you've been watching The Bear, because it's like the most popular show in the world right now.
My fiance's obsessed with that show.
It's a great show. It's very accurate, but you learn to handle pressure well because cooking in a professional kitchen is a high pressure environment. The stakes are high, no pun intended. And the pressure is high. It's physically hot in there. The temperature is high. There are lots of things going on. It's actually the perfect job in a lot of ways for an ADHD brain because there's so many things going on. But if you are someone who is very easily stressed out or thrown off by having a high pressure situation, this can help learn to deal with it. I'm not saying, go and get a job to fix your issues. Find a therapist. But what I'm saying is that this job taught me how to be able to handle that pressure and to stay cool, calm, and collected. Because the second you start to panic, everything is fucked. You are gone because it's like a downward spiral. As soon as one thing starts to get thrown off, your rhythm is off, your timing is off, it affects you for the rest of the night. So if you start fucking up at 5 p.m. and you got to be there until midnight, it's going to be a long night. And you will learn that you do not want to let that happen again. And on top of that, you have to produce results. Every dish must be consistent. You need to be able to take direction and do things exactly the way they need to be done. Anthony Bourdain, one of my favorite personalities, has said that a professional kitchen is one of the last true meritocracies in the world. So most people, they feel like being good at your job is not enough to move up the ladder, and being bad at it is not enough to get fired. But in a professional kitchen, those are the only things that matter. The cook, the chef, does not care if you guys are friends. I have seen people fire their best friends because they screwed things up bad enough and then have to go home and live with that person because they're roommates and look each other in the eye every morning and be like, yeah, I fired you because you sucked at your job. And that's how hardcore of a meritocracy a real high-end professional kitchen can be. So you need to learn to produce results and perform. And these things have served me well because in life, you have high pressure situations, right? Like, I'm sure there's times that you've felt high pressure in a job or in your life, and it's been difficult to cope with.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've learned some skills from being sort of in a trial by fire situation that, you know what, I know that the pressure is on, but I have to be consistent and produce results now. Otherwise, it's going to be bad. Like, that is a very difficult thing to learn unless you learn it through hands-on experience.
I think that there's such a stigma about like being a quitter
Yeah.
that it makes people ashamed to be like, well, I tried it. I didn't really like it, so I'm going to move on.
Yes.
And it's being a quitter is not necessarily a bad thing as long as you don't like, wow, I'm really passionate about this. I fucked up. I'm done. As long as it's not that. But like dancing, I am a shit dancer. When it comes to musical theater, I am not a triple threat.
Right.
I am a double threat. The dancing is garbage. And I used to go into auditions and like the first few auditions that I did, I would really tear myself apart when it came to the dancing. And the roles I would try for were not big dancing roles.
Right.
But I would still tear myself apart. And I think it affected whether or not they cast me.
Right.
Because they could see that. Now, you know, you fast forward a few years after I had done enough theater, you know, when I was auditioning for Rock of Ages or Rent or this past one with Young Frankenstein, we would do the dance part and I would joke around.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oof, here we go. Thank God I sang first. And like, when they see that and they see she's asking questions, she's, you know, joking around, she knows she messed up, but she's still trying. That matters far more. And so walking away from something and being like, I quit. But dancing is a thing I have to do in musical theater. That doesn't mean I'm good at it.
Right.
That doesn't mean I love it. But it's a skill I'm learning, and it's helped me learn how to laugh at myself.
Right. And that helps you with so many other things, you know, whether it's high pressure or not. Like, obviously, if you are one of the leads in a play, there's pressure on you to do well. And learning how to navigate that situation in and of itself is a skill. Like that sort of meta skill of like taking a step back and it's like, all right, I'm not focusing on the dancing. How do I handle the situation around the dancing and things like that you can learn from that type of a situation?
And it goes back to advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, reaching out to that choreographer and saying, hey, can I show up early? I really need help with this.
Yeah.
They'll respect the hell out of that.
Absolutely. Like the effort is really important and that's what matters too. Were you in the band in school too or just the theater?
No, so in high school, the lesson I learned from being on the tennis team in freshman year was that I hated everyone. And whether or not that was a good lesson or not, you know, remains to be seen.
Who knows?
But being on the tennis team in freshman year, as much as I can joke about, oh, it made me hate everybody, I went from a Catholic school with 8 kids in the graduating class to a gigantic high school with like 1,500, 2,000 kids. And I jumped right into tennis. I was good at it. I enjoyed playing. But there was this catty vibe that was awful. I didn't know anybody.
Right.
I wore, you know, shorts instead of the skirt. And I would get made fun of. And I would get excluded. And yes, it made me bitter and hateful, but it also bolstered the fact I'm not changing for anybody.
Right.
I'm not going to conform to be what they like. And that is a very valuable lesson.
Yes.
I ended up dropping, well, after that first year, my mom bribed me with concert tickets and said, if you finish this out, you get these tickets. But after that year, I didn't do any extracurriculars at all because I wanted to get to school and get the fuck home.
Right. That's fair enough.
It wasn't until senior year in high school that the couple of friends I did make were like, you should audition for this. You should audition for this. And ironically enough, it was Young Frankenstein.
That's funny.
And so I did theater that 1 year.
Right.
And honestly, looking back on it, I'm like, man, I actually wish I could have branched out and done this before. Because you know who flocks to theater? Misfits and queers.
Right.
Same as me.
So you didn't really realize that community was out there. And that's kind of, you know, it's an
It's
example
another
of a missed
lesson.
opportunity, but,
Yeah.
you know, a
Open
lesson
your
that was learned
mind.
too.
Like the people in front of you aren't the only people out there.
Right.
And that is a very valuable
Huge
lesson.
one. Huge. And it just applies to everything in life, not just a specific hobby, job, or passion or something like that. Now, you see, I was in the band, and that's kind of where I did find my, you know, group of people. But I went to an average size school. You know, there were, I think, you know, hundreds, not necessarily thousands in my graduating class. But in band, you know, competitive marching band is basically a meme. You know what I mean? People make fun of it. But those who have been there know what goes into it and how it is absolutely way more than you see
It's a lot of
on
work.
that Nick Cannon movie. And it's a lot of work. What you don't realize is that, yes, I did learn more about my instrument and about performing, but I learned about working together as a team, both through the easy and the difficult times. And you learn about your personal responsibility and your contributions and how those things contribute to the group and how you can make this group effort. And my marching band in high school was actually very good. We won a lot of competitions sort of at like the regional and the national level. And then when I went back to teach, it wasn't exactly, because of me, but we had a group that was really good on the staff. And we actually won 2 years in a row, the
Nice.
national championships. So we went through really difficult times where we weren't winning at all, but we still had to show up every single week from August through November when, the season was, and go to practices, go to competitions, and keep fighting through, trying to improve things that were not going well because there was a lot riding on it, and turning a season around. And, you can draw parallels even if you haven't been through, a band experience. In football, like if you follow NFL teams, like that series Hard Knocks, where there's these teams that are just doing absolutely terrible and they follow them to figure out, what their stories are. Even in Formula One, which is very popular now, you have some teams who had a lot of success and then all of a sudden took a nosedive, and you get to see their story of sticking together as a team and working to make improvements and keep fighting through no matter what. And that lesson in approaching things with a long-term mentality of we're going to work through this and get through our problems, no matter what the current state is a super valuable lesson to take with you anywhere you go in life.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I think it's something where you don't necessarily learn how to see yourself as part of a whole until you get to be part of one. So now I'm not in the high school marching band anymore, obviously.
I would really hope not.
Nor am I teaching there, but those lessons and things that I've learned have served me well in jobs and in things that I've had. So like I've learned the value of, being punctual and showing up on time. And again, it's a meme with all of these TV shows and movies about marching bands of like being early and instead of being right on time. But it really is important, you know what I mean? And I show up very punctually to things, even now to this day in my 30s. That was ingrained in me as a teenager. And I have been in situations at work with jobs where the ship was sinking and things were not going well. And I've been in a position of having to take a team where the morale was shit and turn things around and move towards a better, not even just performance, but a better environment for the people that I work with. And I really don't think that I would have been able to kind of navigate that situation at all had I not had those experiences when I was younger and seen what it looks like to be in a bad spot and have to work together as a team to get out of it. And I think that's a valuable lesson that people don't always get if you haven't found yourself in that position before. And if you find yourself in that position as an adult in a job and you're panicking, you may not know what to do, And no, I'm not still, it's not like I'm making a living from teaching music, but those years that I spent doing it really were important to how I handle things now as an adult. So even though I'm not there anymore, there's another example.
They can also prove to you that you're capable of a lot more than you think.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's something to be said for, like, trial by fire.
For sure. Yeah, because you don't necessarily know until you're in that situation how you're going to react. And it's like, one example that I've seen on the internet, and this is like a totally different direction. It's just kind of like a meme I saw. It's like, you ever see people like doing donuts in a parking lot with snow and just like spinning the car around in circles and just like feeling like you're an idiot, right?
Yeah.
So I saw a different perspective on that where someone was like, you know what? If there's kids who are 18, 19 and they're in a parking lot with a little bit of snow doing donuts, that might be the first and only time they've ever actually felt what it's like to be in a car that's actively sliding around in circles. So if you are driving in the snow down the road and your car starts to skid out, if you've never been in that situation, you're going to panic. But if you spent 5 hours sitting around with your friends, burning a tank of gas, going in circles in the parking lot, you might actually have a little bit of muscle memory there to know how to handle the vehicle when it's sliding. And that's a very, different comparison than what we were just talking about. But it's another example of, well, if you have experience in that situation, you'll be much more equipped to handle it when it comes up later on.
Yes. And I think beginning to think about every experience you have or everything that you're doing as a lesson is a really good step toward positive thinking.
Yeah.
I think that there is such thing as like a toxic positivity culture
yeah.
where people are like, no, this is great. And it's like, it's the plot of Candide, but it's positive thinking in itself is a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
And starting to think that sucked, but you know what? I'm never going to do this again.
Yes.
Or now I know that that's not the type of boss I can work for.
Yeah.
And I know the red flags when I'm at an interview.
Right. And it's like, just thinking that everything is fine, let's just stay positive is not going to help.
No.
But thinking, yes, this sucks, but I'm positive I can get through it. Like being positive about your outlook and your ability to get through it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just saying, think positive, it'll all get better on its own. That's not going to solve the problem.
No, it's not going to solve anything. It's going to create more.
Yeah. And it makes me think of kind of my next point of like, I've had sales jobs and lots of sales jobs are high pressure. You know what I mean?
You don't say.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about our positions and jobs in one of the first episodes, but sales, for example, teaches you lots and lots of skills. One of them is being okay with rejection, getting told no a bunch of times. And another thing that sales really teaches you to do is it teaches you to solve problems for people. And that is a skill that I use every single day of my life, whether it's a sales situation, whether it's something with my business or with my day job, or even just with interactions with people. So like the best example I can give of that is like, have you ever been asked like, sell me this pen? Like, that job interview question?
I know of it. Yeah, I was never asked it.
So say, for example, this cup here, Cass, sell me this cup. What would your first instinct be?
Boy, it sure holds liquid.
See, perfect. And I'm glad you answered it that way because people don't understand that the point of sell me this cup or sell me this pen is not for you to just give me a sales pitch. It's to check and see if you really understand what sales is about. Because if somebody's never been a salesperson, they come into an interview, they get that question, they're going to start saying, oh, well, it's a very nice cup, it holds lots of liquid, it keeps things cool, and you should get it, it'll hold things. But that's not actually what a sales process is about. What sales is about is asking questions to figure out your problem and then come up with a solution for it. So if I were to sell you this cup, Cass, instead of saying it's a great cup, I would say, well, how do I even know that this is the right cup for you? Okay. How many glasses of liquid do you drink in a day? Okay. And when you drink that liquid, do you like it to be a certain temperature?
Depends on the liquid, but usually yes.
Yeah. So either hot or cold.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you do this, are you often just sitting in one place or are you moving around a lot when you're drinking liquids?
Moving around.
Okay. So based on what you've told me, Cass, you drink liquids that are both hot and cold. Therefore, I've got a solution to the problem. This cup will keep things hot or cold. It also has a lid because based on what you've told me, you're not sitting in one spot. You're moving around. Therefore, this is the cup for you. And now I have just solved your problem. Mm-hmm. Your problem was liquids might fall all over the place if there's no lid. Liquids may either cool off or warm up depending on the temperature. And I know this is very silly and I'm kind of going on a tangent here. You're probably laughing at me. But the point I'm trying to illustrate is that sales has taught me the skill of being able to talk to someone and identify what problems you're having and see if I can help provide a solution to that. That happens not just in sales or job interactions. That happens every single minute of every day, practically. If my wife is having a problem with someone, I know I'm not going to launch into a sales pitch, but I have learned rather than just start saying, here's an answer, I have learned to ask her questions to figure out what's really bothering her and if she has a problem that I could maybe help with. And that's not being sales or being fake or being cheesy. That's trying to gain an understanding of what somebody else is going through and see if there's anything that you can do to help them with that problem. And people don't understand that that's what really being a good salesperson is about, is solving problems.
And it's weird because mine was kind of the opposite. I was always good at doing that last thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, this will translate to sales.
Yes.
It didn't because I didn't give a shit about what I was selling.
Right.
And I learned I can't fake enthusiasm.
Right. And that's an important lesson to learn.
It's a very important lesson to learn. And it made me realize I need to get out of sales and I'm not going back into a job that requires it.
Right.
because it made me miserable. It was exhausting trying to fake enthusiasm the whole time.
Right.
I just didn't want to do it.
But if you had a job where you were selling scripts for plays about failed suicide attempts to producers, I bet your ass you knew what questions to ask and how to tell them that you can solve the problem they need of having this script. So when it does come time for you to sell things that you are passionate about, your own projects, now you have some example in your life of what that feels like. And you can lean on some of that experience to say, yes, my name is Cascaduto and I've written this play. Tell me, what are you looking for in a playwright who you're going to represent? And you can sell yourself to an agent or whoever, you know.
I'm great at that.
Yeah.
And, another skill that interviewing for all these jobs or auditioning for all these shows or networking to get gigs for my band, things like that, there is something to be said for learning to be confident. And it is very much a fake it till you make it kind of thing. You need to learn how to get comfortable showing off your strong suits and not being like, that sounded arrogant. No, it sounded bold.
Right.
It sounded confident. Just because you're up there saying, I know my worth, it is a good thing. And learning how to navigate that is something you only learn through experience.
And this is that's exactly my point, is where does that confidence come from, Cass? It comes from doing it, right? Mm-hmm. You go out and you fucking do the damn thing. And every time you do it, you say, hey, I did it. I was bad at it, but you know what? I did it, and I'm going to learn, and next time I'm going to tweak it, and I'm going to go a little bit better. I do this to go back to cooking. I do this with recipes that I make. Every single time I make one, I want to see what I can do a little bit better the next time. We'll sit down to eat, and Marissa will say, oh my God, this is so good. I'm like, yeah, but I wish I did just this, just a little bit differently, you know? And it's not because I'm being hypercritical. It's because I know I know I can make it better. And it's just a personal thing for me. This may not apply to your dinners that you're cooking, or it may not apply to you if you're not, a playwright. But if you have anything in your life that you care about being better at, learning these things is not going to be a waste if you eventually use it. And I think you will if you continue to learn from all of the things that you do, temporary, permanent, or not. We tend to bounce from one thing to the other with ADHD, and I'm fucking tired of pretending that that's a bad thing.
I briefly want to talk about, and you'll see how this connects in a second, the winner of Britain's Got Talent 2023.
Oh, yeah?
My fiance and I are absolutely obsessed with this man. He has changed my life. His name's Viggo Venn, and he's a Norwegian dude who positioned himself as a stand-up comedian.
All right, I already love this.
Oh, you have no idea. And you go up and he says he's a stand-up comedian, and you expect him to, tell jokes about airplane food or whatever. And the judges don't know where this is going. And, you normally see these incredible prodigies, these singers, these dancers who are just out of this world. And you're like, he's
One
10
Direction
years old. How is this
on
happening?
That show or whatever,
Yeah. And his act was he would play One More Time by Daft Punk over the speakers.
Uh-huh.
And he would rip his clothes off to reveal layers and layers of safety vests. And every time you think that he's done, there's another one. And Simon Cowell is sitting there questioning every life choice he's ever made. He hits the X right away.
I love seeing that guy sweat.
And at one point, Viggo Venn stops the music and says, Simon Cowell's face is like this, and he does an impression, and he goes, in Norway, that means you're doing really well. And he keeps going. And the rest of the judges love him, and he won the whole damn season. And
wait,
you know why?
Was it the same act every single time, or did he change it up?
No, he did change it up. He always brought the safety vest back in.
Oh, okay.
In his last performance, he actually gave Simon one of his own.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But it was the energy he could generate, that confidence in the face of Simon Cowell, who was an intimidating dude, saying, fuck no, I want you off the stage. And not only doing that, but getting him to a point where the third performance, Simon was actually kind of loving him. You don't learn that from just going up and saying, I guess I'll do this.
Yeah.
No, you go up and you
to the bit.
It was his confidence. His talent was not ripping off a vest.
Exactly.
His talent is stage presence. That is something you learn by going up and getting heckled and getting booed to the point where you're like, This is me.
Yeah.
You don't like it, Simon? I'm still on TV.
Dude, that's why comedians like Jerry Seinfeld and people of that status still go to shitty small clubs in New York and perform for like 15 people. Like, you might go into a comedy club in New York City and run into Jim Gaffigan or like some huge comedian. You know, he's just the first person that came to mind because they go and they workshop and they see what works and they see what doesn't. And many people would think that that's a waste of time. Like, dude, why aren't you playing Madison Square Garden? You know, you're Zach Galifianakis or whatever. But you don't realize that you can't get there without testing these things and practicing. And it kind of, you know, brings up one of the other points that I wanted to connect here is that all of these things build upon each other. So I talked about how I've had skills of handling myself under pressure and staying calm, skills of working with a team and getting a group of people motivated, even when you're in a bad position, learning how to advocate and sell myself and have confidence and have experience. All of these things have been leading up to the work I do with the ADHD project, because I've needed all of those skills to keep myself on track and start this organization that really does want to go and help people with ADHD. And the last one that I was going to reveal here is one of the things that I've done in my life. One of these experiences is something called the 48-hour film project. And Cass is smiling because she's probably heard of it.
I've actually been in one. I wasn't the writer, but I was an actor in one last year.
That's great. So I haven't done it in many years, but a good friend of mine, Joel, shout out to Joel, who also has ADHD and is a great dude.
Of course he does.
So him and the guitar player from my band, Sean, and a bunch of other people that we knew. Joel kind of ran this team where the 48-hour film project is you get a team of people together, and on Friday night you're given a name for a character, something that they do, and a line of dialogue, and then you're given a genre, and you have 48 hours to make a 5 to 7 minute short film using all of that. So we've written so many different things because I did it for like 4 or 5 years, but
it's a lot of work.
It's basically a challenge where you drop off the face of the earth for a weekend and you and some people get together and make a movie. And it's so cool because you literally see everything. The people who like make the Cardi's TV commercials have a team and they compete. And then there were 2 kids from West Warwick who had cell phone videos of the 2 of them in silly costumes made out of construction paper. And both of them were on equal playing field as far as some of the awards and things like that go. So you get everybody from people who are running around with a cell phone camera and people who have thousands of dollars of professional equipment and everything in between. And your team works together to create this video. And it is such a cool experience to be part of. You see how almost all parts of producing a film go and what goes into it. You get to flex your creative muscles. I have written for it. I've shot film as a camera operator. I've been an assistant director. I've done music. One of the years we got silent film. So
that's very music heavy.
We stayed up overnight and filmed it in a restaurant that we had access to, the entire thing overnight with no dialogue. And then the following morning, me and Sean, the other guitar player in my band, and some of the other guys got up super early and completely composed and recorded an entire soundtrack, including effects, from scratch for this film.
Did you have like the little title cards pop up with the like, oh no?
Not exactly, but we did have title cards and things pop up. And so like we figured out, all right, we were like, all right, we're going into this, we're like, all right, worst case scenario, we get silent film. And when we pull fucking silent film, you know? So like, we were like, oh shit, how do we tell this story without any dialogue? How do we figure out how to do this visually? You need to think on the fly and learn how to adapt and work with a group of people and come together and manage all of these different parts of it to produce something. And over the years, we've had years where we didn't get anything. We've had years where we won awards. And what was really important about that is the experience of getting out there with a camera in your hands and filming things has translated directly 1-for-1 to what I do now with the ADHD project, because I basically make videos for TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. I'm literally staring directly into the camera and breaking the fourth wall and making a video right now, although I have somebody else actually behind the camera. Shout out to Vinny and 476 Productions. He's waving his hand back there for y'all. But no, I mean, what I'm getting at here is that had I not done that, I might not have had the confidence from the experience to say, all right, you know what? I'm gonna make videos and I'm gonna do them on my phone at this point at least. But I know the basics of what goes into telling a story through video. I'm going to take that plus the other skills that I've had and apply it to this. And it has become pretty much what I consider my life's work at this point. Some people would say that I wasted 5 weekends over the course of 5 years just going out and making these videos for funsies to hang out with my friend. But at the same time, I don't think that was a waste at all because of what I've learned from doing it. And because now I had the confidence to say, like, I've made things more complicated than a TikTok video. I can sit here and put my face on a video and read off of a script that I wrote and put a video out there. And the more you start to do that and learn that you actually are capable of these things, the more it gives you the confidence to move forward and try more and more. And it really brings us to the point that I'm trying to make is that this all builds on each other, you know? Like all of the things that you've done in your life, I'm sure have built up to where you're at now with your, especially I would think with your theater career, right?
Yeah. And actually, like, so I keep bringing up Young Frankenstein because I have my first rehearsal tonight. I just got cast as Elizabeth, which is another dream role of mine.
Congrats.
Shout out to Megan Mullally. But there is her her first song, Please Don't Touch Me, which is hilarious. There's some tough notes in that.
Yeah.
And I have to keep remembering because I'm getting down on myself as I'm trying to like hit these things. And I have to keep remembering, actually, when I was Maureen in Rent, some of those notes were higher than the highest note Elizabeth sings. But it's a genre I'm less familiar with singing. Rent is rock music. This is pretty classic Broadway. I need to remember, I can do this. Technically, I know I can hit this note. I just need to work on getting the style right.
Right.
And pushing yourself and challenging yourself like that is a skill in of itself.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that like you're a playwright as well. And so I bet you there's people who would be tempted to say like, well, why would I take a role in someone else's play when I'm trying to produce my own play? I was like, well, dude, how are you going to learn about all of these other people that you're putting in your plays? Like the best experience is doing, and you have the confidence because of the experience and because you continue to go out and work on your craft. You know, and I can say this not because I'm making a judgment about my friend Cass, but because we talk and I know her well enough. You know there's plenty of things that you're shit at that you need to be better at.
Dancing.
And I know there's plenty of things that I'm shit at. And until you acknowledge that and realize that maybe this doesn't have to be a permanent thing. I'm not going to be in, you're not going to be in Young Frankenstein every weekend for the rest of your life, but it's something that can challenge you to build your skills better for the next thing that comes down the line. So if you're hating your job right now, maybe it's building towards the next thing that's coming down the line. My job is a good example of that, but we're pretty close to the end, so I don't have time to get into that. That was our timer. But really, the point of all of this and what I'm getting to is that many of these things that I've done, whether it's a job or whether it's a creative thing that I've done or just a skill like cooking, something I've done in my life, many of these things were temporary, but that doesn't mean that they were worthless. And I really want to encourage everybody to be open to experiences, even if they're not going to be forever, even if you don't know where they're going to lead. It's because I've been open to these experiences that I'm able to do what I do now. And it's strictly because I've followed my heart and not my brain on things. And I've said, you know what? I'm going to do this anyways, even if it's not the smartest idea in the world on paper, because doing things just because they're fun and different and exciting and challenging is fucking great and it's valid and it's something that everybody should do. And we don't need to judge everything we do so harshly. You are going to learn something from it. Just because it's not directly related to your career path that you want to be on doesn't mean you shouldn't do it just because it's fun and you enjoy it. And I really want to encourage that.
There's a John Lennon quote, I think, that like very concisely wraps this up, which is time you enjoy wasting isn't really wasted.
No, not at all. And there's also a Kurt Vonnegut quote that I read the other day on Facebook, which is humans were meant to fart around. All right. We are on this earth to fart around and do things. We don't need to suck all of the joy and fun out of life because we have such strict things that we're allowed to do. Mm-hmm. We need the freedom and the ability to fart around and to spend time wasting time that's not actually going to be wasted.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'm Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And this has been Fuck the Plan, the ADHD Project podcast.